2K World Cup time at Summit Point Raceway. It's the fourth of 12 total races in this jam-packed 15th season of the 2K Skip Barber World Cup. I'm Dylan Coyle, joined alongside Gary Weaver, Arjuna Kinkipati in the production booth for today's race. We're at Summit Point, just under 2 miles in length, 3.2 kilometers. It's a 42 degrees Celsius track temperature. Those tires will be hot and grippy. 28 degrees Celsius air temperature, partly cloudy, 52% humidity with 9 kilometer per hour winds. We're looking at the schedule. This is the first race in 3 weeks. Last time we were out at Phoenix International Raceway for the lone oval event of the calendar. That was, well, a very interesting race to say the least. June 14th, that's today. It is round 4, the championship standings. Christian Perez, after missing or not having any points collected and not participating in the first round of the 2K World Cup, will be in front of Thomas Simon, who's been in all 3 races. Remember, the 12-race calendar has 2 drop races that will not affect your running in the championship standings. Anthony Catt, Martin Cruz, Tom Ward round out the top 5. You see those new names on the leaderboard: Joe Osborne, Manuel Lucetta. A lot of those guys has some decent results in the oval race at Phoenix. But nonetheless, this is a new part of the season. We're 25% of the way in. After this one, we'll be a third in. And it's time to welcome in my broadcast partner, Gary Weaver. Gary, how you doing over at the West Coast?
I'm doing it quite well, Dylan, and this track is something that I haven't been to in quite some time. I remember I used to drive this all the time, and it is incredibly fun. I think the last time I drove this was actually either in the Mazda MX-5 or even the Skip Barber cars, and it's so much fun, as Christian Perez demonstrates there with the very slidey car there with that left-hand kink. But this portion of the track, I remember I've always loved. Full speed, and then suddenly no brake markers. You just have to use, well, of course, memory, as well as just figuring out where exactly to brake here.
Yeah, it's a very weird track in the sense that there are no hard braking zones. You're kind of just drifting the car around a lot of these corners, which for the Skip Barber car, obviously that is something that you want to be aware of as we see Perez get right over to the curbing. It's such a dangerous track if you make a mistake, because usually there's no curbing. It's just grass or gravel trap, as you're seeing right here on the front stretch, getting over the white line, all 4 tires over, as he looks to get a time up on the leaderboard here, Gary.
Christian Perez will come across, well, P2 for a quick moment, and then he'll get shuffled down to position number 3, now 4, as all the lap times start to come in. And, well, yeah, this track is challenging in a sense. You see, of course, here that the track is marked by, of course, 2 lines. So essentially, it is possible to run 2 lanes if you want to, maybe 3 wide if you really want to push the issue, but at the same time, not exactly sure if that would be worth the risk.
Yeah, it's always a question of risk versus reward, as we're driving alongside Philip Hammer here in the number, or at least the 60 vehicle in this race. In the 2K World Cup, every driver has their own custom livery and number, something you don't usually get in official races on the iRacing calendar, like Friday Night Prime Time's Indy Pro 2000 series. Most of the drivers have set a time. So far, it's looking like a much smaller grid than one we've seen in the past few races here, Gary. Usually we're seeing grids of 50 plus up to 58 cars, but right now only showing on the grid are around 33 or 34 showing. So what do you feel like that smaller grid could add to the racing?
That smaller grid could help out in some cases for some drivers, especially those who've not had the best of luck, especially in the past few weeks. I would be bringing up Kane, but it does not look like he is here, so he might be taking this week as a drop week, possibly last race as well. So in a sense, it's something that you also have to kind of think about when exactly you should take your drop weeks.
Well, the starting grid has been set. We'll go through the top 20 quickly. Martin Cruz, Benny Simonson on the top row. Enzo Canta, who has to serve a drive-through penalty, is starting third, and Joe Osborne in fourth.
The fifth place position will be going to Tomas Simon. Edwin Valerino will start sixth. Tom Ward starts seventh. Anthony Cat will be starting in eighth.
You've got Victor Agugiano and Alexis Tapavicchio in 10th, Christian Perez in 11th, and Andrew Procario in P12.
George Matuchinski starts off in the lucky number position 13 with Alejandro Lero starting 14th. Danielle Forgirani will start in 15th. 16th is Manuel Lucero.
Simon Edwards 17th, Andy Witt 18th, Philip Hammer in 19th, Thomas Torp in 20th, and we'll show you the rest of the leaderboard down here. So there have been some major penalties given out at the conclusion of the Phoenix race. Enzo Canta had a lot of penalty points, and he was deemed to have had a Category 4 incident, which is not deliberate wrecking, but it is very reckless driving. He'll have to serve a drive-through, and this is not going to be a race he can drop. That is what happens when you serve a drive-through, as the drivers are all gridding up here. Just a few that have not yet gotten themselves to the starting grid. Martin Cruz will be starting in first on the right-hand side of the pack. He'll have the inside line going down into turn one here, as this entire group is going to make a mad dash. Enzo Canta is going to take a big hit, but he'll have to survive just to go into the pit lane for his drive-through. We're about to get underway here in the fourth round of the 2K World Cup. I'm so excited for this one. You should too. Green flag is in the air, and we're underway here at Summit Point. Martin Cruz, with a pretty decent getaway, gets to the inside line immediately, but the draft is strong, and Benny Simonson has a big run, moves to the outside of Cruz, down into turn one. He has some nice gain here. Will he be able to make it stick? It looks like they're going to be side by side coming out of turn one, but Simonson made it work on the outside. He'll have the inside position here going into another long corner here. Oh, Summit Point, it's a beautiful track for this car, and Benny Simonson takes the lead but gets two wheels into the gravel trap, and there's a pack of three with Enzo Canta right in the mix here as they head down to the second part of this track, Gary.
Bill Osborne was also in the gravel trap. He went really wide, managed to hang on to it luckily, but not the best way for him to start this race. But lucky for him, at least for Joe Osborne, he's going to have the draft of Enzo Canta just for a few more corners until Canta has to serve that drive-through penalty. But that's going to leave Osborne at a disadvantage unless Cruz and Simonson decide to battle it out. But Simonson with a great outside pass to start off, and he'll lead the lap coming to the start-finish line.
Simonson will lead the lap, and Enzo Canta dives down in the pit lane, almost got a little too fast heading into the pits. Now, this is probably the best possible track you could have a drive-through penalty at, because he is already out and back on the track. He won't even fall back into last place. That is how ridiculously short that this pit stop, this pit circuit is here at Summit Point. Benny Simonson has lost the lead to Martin Cruz down that front stretch, so he'll have to try and get back in the draft, going down again into the backstretch portion of Summit Point Motorsports Park. This is where they call Wagon Bend, and again through the gravel and the chute. Some of these corner names are very basic, but what you'll see right here is coming up to this pre-turn to the carousel, obviously stealing that carousel name from a bunch of other tracks. It looks exactly the same here. Nothing too special, except it was one of the newer parts added at this track that has been very little, had very little modifications throughout its history. It used to be that one section in a big wreck, as we see on air, Gary.
Yeah, huge crash. Looks to be just a couple laps ago here on this replay. You see a few drivers making contact. Two separate incidences, actually, both happening at the same time. About 4, maybe 5 drivers getting some major damage. Unfortunately, one landing upside down as a wheel almost comically rolls away in the background.
This new iRacing damage model has a great way of making crashes look a lot more interesting for the broadcasters like us.
Right now, Joe Osborne actually sitting in the slipstream, continuing actually to sit in the slipstream of Benny Simonson, as well as Martin Cruz. Cruz had gotten around, and well, now it's just a battle between these two. I think Osborne's waiting for the right moment to get by these two once those two go side by side, but really can't go anywhere else. You can try and make it 3 wide, but it's not entirely possible. You saw them have both their right side tires in the gravel trap. That's almost a staple here at Summit Point, is that at some point, almost consistently, you're always going to have your left side tires in that gravel trap.
There is a pun in saying at some point at Summit Point there, but I'll just blatantly say it and let everybody else understand what I was trying to get to from there. But as we exit the carousel and go down towards the last corner of the track, it's called Paddock Bend, which is obviously a nod to some of the other famous tracks here in the iRacing calendar, such as Brands Hatch, Paddock Hill. We go down to the front stretch with Martin Cruz still in the lead, but a big draft. It's the 3 drivers of Cruz, Simonson, and Joe Osborne that have a big gain at the front. But look at back in the pack, it's Thomas Simon having to deal with a lot of inside traffic. One of them being Edwin Valerino, who gets in front of him, it looks like, and he'll go into P4. This turn 1, it's never a bad thing to be on the outside because you really can still get a good run going into the later turns, and Valerino gets off into the gravel right in front of Simon and the rest of the front pack, but he survives it. It's reminiscent of Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s pass in the grass at Charlotte many decades ago. He was still able to keep that position.
Tom Ward also had an incredible view of that when that happened in front of him. As actually he was also in the gravel trap as well. He hung on to it. So everyone having some minor complications almost with that gravel trap, as well, that's just out to pretty much just grab your tires and almost ruin your day there.
Just awesome watching all of these drivers head down into the Paddock Bend, the final corner of this track. And just so everybody knows, there will be at least one pit stop happening in today's race. The pit window is 10 to 14 laps. It's a 24-lap event. So Gary, a lot of these drivers might be wanting to stay in the draft to try and save as much fuel as possible.
Yeah, I was actually about to bring that up as well, is that if they pit after lap 12, so pretty much lap 13 or lap 14, they can pretty much make it to the end guaranteed, depending on how they depending on how they run after their pit stops. As pretty much everybody here is in the gravel with their left side tires. The second group being led by Tomas Simon all the way through. Looks to be, well, pretty much everybody else. A little bit of contact in the back. That is the 21 machine of...
Big crash.
Yeah, it's a huge crash.
Anthony Catt goes off into the gravel. He gets his car back on track, but that is a big incident for one of the championship leaders in Anthony Catt. We'll catch a replay here, Gary.
21 as well, also involved another driver with Anthony Catt. So Catt may have actually gotten away almost relatively unscathed there, and that's what happened. Just a little bit of contact from behind and then a huge crash. Unfortunately, that is going to be, well, not exactly the day done, but definitely going to put a huge bearing. As you see, number 21 just, unfortunately, it's tagged from behind, front wing broken for another driver that was also involved in, well, that is pretty much all said and done very early on.
A pass to go back in the lead for Benny Simonson. Martin Cruz again right at his gearbox. Christian Perez, the championship leader, currently scored in 7th after starting the race in 11th. So he's having a pretty decent day so far, gaining 4 positions, but he gets right into the back right tire of Tom Ward. Or actually, that was going to be Victor Aguaglianu. Excuse me for butchering that name, but that could have been disastrous for Perez. He's going to be happy to have 2 drop weeks. However, remember, he already technically has one drop in his calendar so far. He'll need to have good results for all but one of the remaining races, since every other driver has that catching point, has that safety net of having 2 races totally removed from their books in the future because Perez missed that first race, did not get any points there. That will be his drop. So it's kind of a precarious situation for Perez, the championship leader, as the season winds down and the championship battle continues to rage on.
Well, speaking of battles raging on, here comes Christian Perez on the driver's right-hand side of Tom Ward going into turn 1. And just like that pass made, Tom Ward will, not Tom Ward, but Christian Perez rather, will set his sights on Edwin Valerino just many car lengths ahead as well. Tom Ward also getting passed on the outside by Tomas Simon, who has the draft of Christian Perez. So we'll see how these two fare heading into this little left-hand kink almost. Getting into the gravel trap once again. Tom Ward will continue the fallback. He's now shuffled to 7th.
That front stretch is so long and such a drafting point for these drivers that they're really clearing each other before they even get into turn 1. As they go into the paddock bend section, there's already a big front stretch, not a front stretch, but a big straightaway heading towards that turn. So you basically have 2 full straights of just drafting ease, really. And you see right here with the rear end of Martin Cruz's vehicle, you see Benny Simonson and Joe Osborne. They were able to get in the draft and get very close to the vehicle of Martin Cruz, and going down into turn 1, it's still quite a ways away. You can look at that, just a big run for Joe Osborne pulling to the right of Benny Simonson here. I don't think Simonson could go down into the inside because he has Osborne right on his gearbox, but rightfully so. They all just stay in a line, but Martin Cruz gets a little wide coming out of turn 1 into this little right-hand kink.
Also seem to be lifting as well just to save not only fuel, but stay also behind the driver in front just to, well, of course, save fuel. So it's a 2-in-1 combination essentially to try and help them out make it into the halfway point of this race for their pit stop. So everyone, of course, trying to just plan for that one stop. And if drivers do come in that lap 10 or 11, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised because some of those drivers may have been pushing a little bit too hard throughout the course, and they're going to have to be trying to save as much as possible when it comes to the second half of this race.
And as we see a replay here of Louis Schenna just getting a little bit of a turn going into that gravel trap section, gets tagged by the driver behind him, and that looks like race over for Schenna as he gets a tow and back into pit lane. As we join some live pictures of that front pack action. As you said just a little bit earlier, Gary, you are going to see some of these drivers lift because they don't want to make any risky moves and make a big mistake, especially with the race not even at the halfway point here. I think that in a lap or two's time, you're going to see a lot of drivers start to get into the pit lane as the pit window opens. You might see some strategy play out here, as we have seen quite a few times in the 2K World Cup so far, as we drive with Andrew Precario in a bit of a precarious situation himself, in a big line of drivers, 4 of them in the same pack. There's Simon Edwards right behind Precario as they go into this corner just before the carousel section. You really cannot go side by side here. It's all about the drive off you get at the exit of the carousel into that long straight in this left-handed kink that you'll see all of these drivers make in a snaking scenario here. All of these drivers, man, they've got to be careful here as Joe Osborne falls way back of Benny Simonson and Martin Cruz. Will they go down into the pits? No one does at the end of lap 9, but you might see some guys start to go down at the end of this lap 10. That is when the pit window opens up, and Benny Simonson, Gary, has a huge bit of momentum, but he has to lift.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Benny Simonson was looking to go into the lead, but unfortunately for him, he's saying, well, I should, but you know what? I'd rather sit back, save fuel, make it to the halfway point just to make sure. and then go all out. Maybe even stretch the run to lap 13 or lap 14 as we have a huge crash in turn 1, unfortunately. A couple drivers involved on the outer lanes, and that is the 811 of George Matuszynski, as well as another driver also involved, unfortunately. Simon Edwards was also involved. Oh man, a 4-car crash and the track almost completely blocked.
Wow, Simon Edwards, who was in 11th place coming into this championship round, will be out of this race. I'll probably have to use it as a bit of a drop point for him in this 12-race calendar. Just a big incident at the end of this long straightaway. And obviously, once you get a few guys get involved, you're going to have a lot more drivers go off there just because of the nature of this close racing. We join live picture again. No one seems to want to head down into that pit lane. However, if I look back, it looks like there was a big incident with Victor Gugianu, who has lost his front wheel. Some drivers are going into the pits from far back, but that's just some dangerous racing here, especially with how close these cars do like to stick against each other with. Martin Cruz has the leader, the fastest lap with a 1:27 is Edwin Valerino, and Valerino is in P4, so he's gotten himself into the running here for a possible win. Christian Perez just a few car lengths back of this 4-car train as we head down into the carousel section, Gary.
Valerino coming incredibly close to Joe Osborne, late braking just to catch up into that slipstream, and we'll see if any of these lead cars do decide to come into the pit road this time by, but we'll see really who was pushing the most. And well, if Martin Cruz does not come in this time by, I will be quite surprised actually, because he's been out front for a majority of this first half. So we'll see if he looks to go in. He does not, so he knows he has enough. He'll be pitting at the halfway point. He'll be able to for sure make it to the end even while leading a group.
Well, the first person from that lead bunch is Tom Ward. He goes into the pits. He came from the 7th place spot to head down the pits, and he actually gets collected with the driver in the pits. That is Pericles Adamopoulos, who was far back in the order, a lap down as they cross the line. And he's actually right in front of Enzo Conta in traffic. Just dangerous racing as we see as Benny Simonson still falls right back in line behind Martin Cruz.
Or the nose cone may have fallen off as well with that contact, unfortunately, but there is at least one faster pair available for these drivers if need be. So that's going to be one of those situations where it's definitely needed. But now this is going to be something to look ahead for, is that we have the entire top 5 all in the line here. If all 5 of these drivers come into the pit road at the same time, this is going to be a little bit sketchy in a sense, especially with pit entry, because if you have 5 cars all in the line, all right next to each other, say Benny Simonson and Martin Cruz, well, trying to get from 100 down to 25, it's not really going to work out. But no one. So they're all going to try and stretch it out here.
Everyone on back to Andrew Precario, Manuel Lucetta, Andy Witt. Will he go? He'll be the first guy to go into pit lane. He pits from 9th place. So all of these drivers, they should be good to go till the end of this race, especially Martin Cruz. He was the big question mark. It seems like these guys could the 10 to 14 lap window for the pits, it doesn't seem to be anything to give these drivers a headache in terms of going for a 2-stop strategy. The skip barbers are only allowed to be filled to 40% of its maximum fillage rate. So these drivers are being forced to go down into pit lane. Makes for some really good strategy options, as we've seen drivers like Anthony Catt take advantage of that in recent weeks.
We'll see if anyone decides to come into pit road this time around, but I don't know, with how they've been staying out, I wouldn't be surprised if they came in at lap 14, because they've been doing very well so far. They've also been lifting, saving fuel. No one's been making any passes. So a calm before the storm. We might have a split. Martin Cruz looks to the right-hand side, doesn't come in. Although Edwin Valerino, the only lone driver of this top 5, I should say, to come into pit road.
This is going to be extremely interesting if Valerino gets a really good lap time coming out of here, and we'll have to pay attention to that. His last lap before coming in was a 1:28.66. So if he can get a much better lap, that obviously will lead to better pictures, as we see a live shot of Martin Cruz being passed by Benny Simonsen, but they get side by side. Cruz has to pull off a little bit, but Joe Osborne goes to the left of Cruz. And will we see Cruz fall into third place for the first time today? Yes, we will. Joe Osborne with a really daring maneuver down the inside at that left-hand kink there before we head into the carousel section. Joe Osborne, what a move. Cruz lost out mightily as this lap gets to its halfway point.
We'll see where everyone sorts out. All four of these drivers now all in the line. They'll have to pit now or else risk, well, pretty much everything, running out of fuel or what have you. So Christian Perez had a really large gap, maybe 5-10 car lengths between himself and the rest of the top three. But this is going to be where he'd have to give a lot of space as everyone comes in. Perez stays out, actually.
Wow, Christian Perez is going to try and be the daring one here, and so does Andrew Precario. So you're going to see that at lap 14 or lap 13, that's where everyone starts to go into the pits from this lead bunch. Andrew Precario and Christian Perez are the two drivers that are going to go with the overcut. We'll see if that works out for them. But remember, you'll have to look into the back of the field for that undercut possibility, because it could work out very well for Edwin Valerino. We'll have to pay attention, and Valerino gets out in front of all the drivers going into the pit lane. It looks like he will go into P2 as Benny Simonsen had a really fast pit in, pit out, and pit stop. So Valerino gains 2 positions from there, and he'll most certainly catch up to that lead car.
The provisional P2 at the moment for Edwin Valerino, an incredible job, and that's going to play off, but not as much as it will for Benny Simonsen, who, like you mentioned, Dylan, is that he's going to have a fast pit entry, pit exit, and that's going to help him a lot to get into the provisional pole position. Now it's something to look ahead for as Christian Perez goes to pit road, this time by on lap 15, coming to lap 16. A little bit hot on pit entry, but manages to slow it down. Andrew Precario also goes into the pit lane. This is something that we have to look out for. As you see on the track map there, your lead cars at the very bottom as well, at the bottom of the track map in pit road. You have to wait for them to see when they move.
This is the most frustrating part of being a race driver, just watching the cars close in on you as Perez comes out of his pit stall. Benny Simonsen, I don't think he's going to have enough to catch him. I think Christian Perez timed this perfectly. It's going to be Simonsen with a lot of momentum heading down towards 1, but Perez has that advantage and will take the lead and keep it heading into turn 1. So that overcut worked out for him, and Andrew Precario, it might not have worked out so well for him. Nonetheless, the championship leader has now gotten himself in the first place from 5th place. That was a daring move, and you really just got to throw the dice. What would hurt? It wouldn't hurt to go an extra lap and see what you can do. The worst thing that'll happen is you'll stay in the same position or maybe lose a couple, but he had such a gap in front and behind him to make that opportunity work. And remember, Edwin Valerino with the undercut is also going to be in front as we look a replay here, Gary. Richard Kent slowing down.
Richard Kent actually may have run out of fuel, unfortunately for him. He had to take a tow. So Richard Kent having a not the best of luck so far. Tried to stretch it, possibly one more lap, was hopefully going to go into pit road that time around. But unfortunately, the decision was made for him.
That's always an upsetting feeling as a driver, but at the same time, in iRacing, when it's up to you to pay attention to your fuel, you got to be counting down just how many liters per lap that you are using. And if you're not able to really count it correctly, well, that's unfortunately on you. But as we see that 1.5 second gap between Simonsen and Valerino, that is how big it is. But I can tell you, if Perez and Simonson continue to fight, it's going to let the pack of Valerino, Cruz, and Osborne right back into this race.
And with this little bit of a breakaway, Edwin Valerino he almost took himself out of the race with that, as Martin Cruz goes over on the left-hand side to get by Valerino after he had a very unintentional excursion into the gravel trap, manages to hang on to it, but that lost momentum will get Cruz around him into P3. Osborne just sitting back. I'm pretty sure he would have loved to take the opportunity to get up another position, get back into the fight for the lead. But now this is something that these three have to keep in mind, is that if they stay in line and the top two battle it out, they can easily catch up to the top two, and this could already be a 5-car battle for the lead. But right now, Simonson and Perez, they have a good amount of distance between themselves and Cruz.
Yeah, that's really important to remember here. They've got to hope the drivers from 3rd to 5th, Valerino, Cruz, and Osborne, are really going to have to hope that they're able to work together as Perez and Simonson start to fight it out. And as you see this close-knit battle, Simonson will just take his foot off the throttle a bit before hitting the brakes. All of the top 5 are staying in line, but Tom Ward back in 6th, he's not going to be happy with Thomas Simon trying to take that place away, and Ward keeps it back in that, it's almost like the mid-pack battle of the front, because there's just so many drivers. We're used to a lot more colorful vehicles participating in the 2K World Cup. Obviously, that's not something we're seeing in this race right now, as Perez still holds his mark. Cruz still in 3rd, Valerino 4th, Osborne 5th. But you see a little bit of lap traffic there. It's going to be Hans Hewer, who is still on the lead lap. At the last car on the lead lap, he has a 10-second disadvantage to Simon Edwards in front of him, but you can almost guarantee the fact that Perez, Simonson, and the rest of this group will catch him soon enough. What happens if they catch him in a place like the carousel?
I mean, only the worst that could be imagined, especially with how narrow this track is at some points, where you can't exactly, fortunately, have a good passing opportunity where it's such a narrow portion of the track. But it's possible. But it's the thing is, the carousel, it swaps the lanes, preferred lanes, so much. You go from the left lane to the right lane, back into the left lane in some cases, and it's just all over the place. So lap cars can't exactly stay in a certain lane unless they want to unintentionally mess up a lead lap car.
Summit Point makes the overtaking maneuvers very difficult because there's no hard braking turns at all on this track. I mean, you can make the argument that the turn right before the carousel is a hard braking corner, but because of the carousel being the turn right afterwards, you really can't get into a position to line up a move. All you can really hope for is staying in line with the car in front of you and then hoping that the draft will help you make a move heading into the final turn or paddock bend, or turn 1, that is, of the next lap. As we are starting to wind down on these laps, 5 to go as the lap car in front of this group, he goes off track a bit. That's Hans Hewer, remember. There are just going to be 5 laps to go as he crosses the line there. My word, this race, I really don't know what's going to happen. I will say, though, they are lifting very strongly, and look at the entire pack right behind Benny Simonson. They have caught up. Anyone back to Joe Osborne could win this race, and I'll tell you what, this angry pack of cars is really going to put Hans Hewer in a dangerous spot. He could get some penalty points if something happens here. So what goes through his mind? Does he just want to pull over and wait for this lead group of cars to just go by? Because there's going to be a lot more cars coming right behind it.
I'll have to wait and see. I mean, with this section, which is actually a good thing they didn't catch him right here, you see just how many different lanes they go into. They go into the right lane here. I mean, that could be a lifting opportunity at the same time in the left, but at the same time you go back into the left and then back into the right, and then you just have to hope that you catch the lead, the lap down, or at least the lap car on a straightaway. So for Hans Hewer, he can just move over to the left-hand side, let them by, and that way the lead cars get the preferred lane. But at the same time, You know, you have to somehow time it right with catching up to the lap car, but the lap car also has to figure out, okay, well, here's a good place to let them by. Maybe I should try here, or maybe just sit off the track temporarily.
Oh, look at that run down the right side. Martin Cruz gonna take over 2 positions in 1 corner. He lifts early. He gets into the curbing on the inside line out of turn 1, and it looks like Christian Perez will be side by side at the exit of 1 into this left-hand kink. Cruz is going to have to stick it on the outside line into the gravel, has to get into the gravel. All 4 wheels slides a bit, but he gets himself back on track, and he still is side by side with Perez. Almost cuts him off though, and Benny Simonson looks to make a run down the inside. Joe Osborne slide jobs up to Edwin Valerino, and he takes the position back. Cruz on the inside here at the carousel. Will he make it stick? He does. Martin Cruz into second place with a full head of steam with just 4 laps to go, 3 at the line.
And that is all before they all caught to Hans Hewer, so this is actually going to be something to really look ahead for. Cruz timed it almost perfectly, and Perez is going to be having to look in his mirror to seeing when Cruz is going to make that move on him for the lead. Perez almost immediately tries to shake the slipstream, can't really do anything. He'll hold his line, as here comes Martin Cruz, Benny Simonson lurking in case anything does happen. So Cruz could actually clear Christian Perez almost, no, but by about half a car length.
But look at Benny Simonson. Look at Benny Simonson. He got right up to the rear tires of Martin Cruz, and he's going to be in a big draft point for him against Perez and Cruz. They're basically side by side, all 3 drivers, as Cruz or Simonson is acting, or Perez, excuse me, is acting as a kind of joint point. As Cruz goes all track into the gravel trap, still side by side. This is great racing in the 2K World Cup. None of them want to take themselves out of contention though, and could you imagine the scenes if Perez goes off? That would be his drop race possibly, and this is not a situation he wants to find himself in. As that Hans Hewer car, they're ever so slightly closer to him with around 2.5 laps remaining. I don't know if they'll catch him because of all this battling in this pack. Joe Osborne is right on the gearbox. Benny Simonson, this is as close as you could possibly get to a 4-way battle for the win. Cruz right up to the gearbox of Christian Perez. All of them go outside the curbing, and this draft, it's going to be immense. With 2 laps to go at the line, look at Cruz, pulls out to the right. Simonson goes with Cruz. They're going to go 3 wide. Oh, Simonson, his right tires at the white line at the edge of the track, 3 wide. It's Perez who has to go outside. Perez gets hit by Cruz. Cruz stays on track. Perez is taken out of the contention for the win. You cannot go 3 wide into turn 1. 2 laps to go, and it's now Perez's race that he does not want to remember. Benny Simonson is in front, Joe Osborne in second, and Martin Cruz in third.
Joe Osborne going to be looking ahead for the lead once he can somehow get around Benny Simonson. Perez got shuffled off. He's luckily still continuing, but I'm going to take a quick replay as your top 4 now continue to battle it out, being Simonson, Osborne, Cruz, and Valerino. All your top 4. You see Perez there on the replay get shoved off, but luckily no major damage, no suspension or tire damage for him. So this is going to almost help out for Christian Perez. He kind of got really lucky there with that contact, and they're going to be coming to the final lap through the final corners. Look for Joe Osborne and maybe Martin Cruz to make a pass for the lead. It's going to be both of them moving to the inside lane, or the driver's right-hand side rather.
And just to let you all know, Christian Perez has manually disconnected. This is his next drop race. We were talking about it. This is not a good situation for him. Benny Simonson tries to throw a block on Martin Cruz into turn 1. Is it successful? It is, but Simonson with a run out of turn 1 went outside. Martin Cruz fell back a little bit, and now it's Simonson with around a car length in between him and Cruz. It's the final lap in round 4 of the 2K World up at Summit Point. Who's going to win? It could be any of the top three, even Edwin Valerino back and forth. Hans Hewer, that lap car, is just ahead. Cruz right at the right rear tire of Simonson, but he has to back off into the carousel section for the final time of this race. They're going to have to go single file, but I can guarantee you that there will be a daring move down in the paddock bend if they are close enough. Oh, Simonson goes wide. It's Martin Cruz's first place to go with. Cruz gets in the first as Simonson goes off into the gravel, and so does Joe Osborne. Martin Cruz has around 5 car lengths in front. He is going to win this if he makes it through this one final corner. It's chaos from the back going out of paddock bend. This race is all Martin Cruz's. What a way to finish it. And at the checkered flag, Martin Cruz wins at Summit Point. What a final sector.
Benny Simonson had unfortunately run out of fuel by the end of that lap, and almost couldn't have been timed better, but at the same time it couldn't have been timed worse for Simonson. He's able to cross the start-finish line all the way from running in the lead down to 7th.
Wow, wow, wow. We still have some action excuse me, going in the back of the pack, Gary.
Now he's following a few drivers rounding it out. It's going to be a side-by-side drag race between Kanta and Vico for the 19th place position, and it's going to be just by about a quarter of a car length. An amazing drag race by those two, and that was coming through the final corner as well. They were already side-by-side.
Well, Enzo Kanta, with that 20th place finish, it's not too bad for a driver who had to take a pass-through penalty at the beginning of this race. This cannot be a drop point for him because of the fact that it was a drive-through race for him. Everyone is about to cross the line. Hans Hewer will be the final driver over in 24th place. What a final look at this tremendous race that's just fun to watch. All of these guys wanted to win so bad. Martin Cruz comes out with the victory. Joe Osborne half a second behind. Thomas Simon 2 seconds back. Tom Ward, Andrew Precario, Anthony Catt with a great race. Benny Simonson, Manuel Lucetta, Edwin Villarano, and Danielle Camaria, excuse me.
Then your top 20 will be George Machuchinski, Philip Hammer finishing in his 12th place, Thomas Torp P13 running Griffin 14th, and Danielle Forgiorini finishes in the 15th place position. Chris McGowan, Alejandro Lyro, Jonathan Dance, Alexis Tapia Vico, and Enzo Kanta round out 16th through 20th.
And then Simon Edwards, Gustavo Condi, Neil Kemp, Hans Hewer, they're on the lead lap. Rob Adams, Richard Kent, Carl Dronke, Don Parks, and Pericles Ananopoulos, all just one lap down. Christian Perez. Oh, Perez finishes 30th, 2 laps down. And then Andy Witt, Victor Guigino, 12 laps down. Louis Schenna, 19 laps down. And Anthony Hurlim, 23 laps. He was out of it at the start of the race. Some non-happy drivers. Alexis Tapiovico says, "Good job, Victor. Thanks for destroying my race." So obviously some incidents will be looked at by the race stewards. This was a ridiculously fun one. And Gary, I think it's time to take a short break, look at some messages from our iRacing partners, and we'll be right back to talk about this race and talk with some drivers. Martin Cruz, the winner of the 4th round of the Skip Barber 2K World Cup at Summit Point Raceway. Cruz was not in first with just one sector to go at the track, and he finishes in that way after Benny Simonson was thought to have run out of fuel out of first place. What a fantastic way to end this race, which saw so many battles for really pretty much the entire run, with all the front pack cars and the mid pack, even down the order. 24 cars finished on the lead. Lap 33 entered into this one. Gary, any closing thoughts on this ridiculously fun race?
I mean, that's pretty much all that was. It was just ridiculously fun throughout this entire race, with the one stop all coming to an end. Simonson almost had it, but unfortunately he had run out of fuel. If he had stayed out one lap longer, then he may have made it. But at the same time, I mean, Christian Perez also unfortunately gotten shuffled out. But we can look ahead forward to next week, Dylan.
Oh, yes, I am too. Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. In 2 weeks, it's the round 5 of the 2K World Cup. The things are getting a little bit clearer in terms of who the contenders and the pretenders are in this schedule. We'll go to Virginia International Raceway for Gary, your last race in the broadcast booth on July 12th. We'll go another 2 weeks to Donington Park. It's going to go across the seas once we do get into the back half of this calendar. Obviously, Phillip Island, Chircahua, Villeneuve, Lime Rock Park, Autodromo Jose Carlos Pache, also known as Interlagos, and I can't wait for that finale at Watkins Glen in October. These are some great tracks that fit the Skip Barber Formula 2000 car very well. And I will say, we do enjoy everyone watching, and we enjoy reading your comments on the live stream on the iRacing Esports Network. This broadcast brought to you by Race Spot TV at Summit Point, obviously. And we'll leave you here with Martin Cruz winning this one, Joe Osborne and Thomas Simon coming out on the podium. I'm Dylan Coyle, Gary Weaver, and Arjuna Kankipati in the production booth. We say so long, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. The round 5 at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park.